Hello, everybody. Well, the economy is already struggling and the prices are skyrocketing. Our industry has been dealt another major blow last Wednesday. More specifically, but the ramification will be felt in all corners of your life and in your industry. The oil industry has come under attack. A district court in the Netherlands has convicted Royal Dutch Shell, also known as Shell, for not doing enough against climate change, and I will go into the legal basis in a moment. Secondly, there have been activist hedge funds changing and commanding the policies of Chevron and Exxon, both US American giant oil corporations. And the changes will be more direct than you ever imagined, because you may think, okay, if they have some major policy changes, either commanded by a court or by some strange shareholders, that will only raise the price. So in effect, you will just have more expensive products. Almost everything contains oil in one way or another, or some byproducts of the production. Or you think that it will be felt at the gas station, right? That's the implications you think of, but it is actually more direct. They actually seek to bring down oil consumption. They call this area Scope 3. And what that means is that the companies, Exxon, Shell, Chevron, they are looking into the reduction of oil use by, you guess it, you. They want your behavior to be changed. So now it's no longer just the government your nanny, and it's not just your social media being your nanny. No, your new mother and new father will also be your gas station, or the oil manufacturers. They have decided that you were a bad person and have polluted the environment with CO2 in the air, and now they have to change your behavior. And this is in the parameter of their policies. This is supposedly what they are supposed to do. And while you think, okay, this is not their business at all, what I do with their oil, they think differently, because they don't have the shareholder value approach anymore. This has been explicitly stated by various newspaper articles I read about it, by the investors themselves, etc. They are looking into the stakeholder economy, where basically every activist, everybody who claims to speak for the environment or for any pet group of the left, whatever, these stakeholders, the consumer also supposedly comes to have a say, has to be considered, and that you can lose the focus on the sheer shareholder value. All of the articles that I read were actually justifying that move with shareholder value, which is strange enough. But it is to kind of appease, put into a slumber those who have still some cells between their ears. So their complaint was about the diminishing dividend returns over the past years, and the solution supposedly is to look into everything else but what might be the true causes of it. So, for example, they actually acknowledged that there was this coronavirus thing going on that drove down the economies, and therefore it also drove down the demand for oil, and therefore the prices and the potential profits. But they just skip in a beat and continue with, well, but that is because you are too reliant on your business on oil. So instead of saying, well, let's just fix the underlying issue, the lack of demand for oil, they say, well, let's just do something else. So look here, there's a scroll. And the second argument was that they see an overall decline of the dividends over the longer period. And that is simply because of the basic economics of it. The reserves, they become smaller and ever more remote, and you need more sophisticated technology to actually access those resorts. But that doesn't mean that there are no profits left in the oil business altogether, and that you should just do something else. And this is the actual thing. They speak about the something else as if the alternatives were profitable, like solar energy, like the windmill energy, blah, 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 as if those things were more profitable. And the tricks they use is that the government, by raising taxes from small businesses, will transfer that taxpayer money taken from the small businesses, from the little guy, and will transfer it into subsidies. And then with the subsidies, those alternative business models, which are in reality just plundering the community funds business, those alternative businesses seem more lucrative than actually making money. And what strikes me about these activist hedge funds that went into Exxon and into Chevron is that they claim they have all these better options, that they have these better alternatives, the more profitable, more sustainable, which suggests more lasting, stronger options at their disposal. Well, but if they have so, why aren't they just building up businesses of their own, exploiting those options? No, they have to go into existing options like a Marvel franchise or something, and then they have to corrupt that existing option with their better ideas. And not only do these activist hedge funds know better than the directors of the company what is best and what are the best options, the best investment options. Now it's of course also the government. And in the case against Shell, the Dutch judges decided or made the case about the defense of the original business model against better options. So it is not the right of a company to seek profitable business on its own. No, the business has to defend and justify the ambition to make profit in the first place. And if the government does not like it and feels like there were better options, then the business has no right to conduct business, basically. That was the pathway of that court case. So we basically just saw the free market economy in and of itself, not just Shell, but the market economy in and of itself, losing a court case. On its very existence, and that is that they can decide on their own what options, what activities are profitable and which ones are not. It is a bit difficult to find the actual legal basis for this procedure, but I found it. It is, it's embedded in a very, very long verdict text that includes all kind of opinions, very judgmentally. I mean, judges. Very judgmentally phrased as the science has already found out this and science says that and there is a climate model this and so on. And you find somewhere in between all of this sermon the headline for conventions, international agreements and policy intentions. And there they walk down the entire process of international agreement on the United Nations level, EU level, etc., step by step, down to something that is called the Climate Act. So the Netherlands actually have an act that has prescribed companies to abide to climate targets. So the companies have to come up with strategies, business plans, to justify that they dare to make profit. You see how the economy is heading if this is the law, and I looked it up, it actually is. Before I go into that, I want to say that it is based on a stupid, dumb-ass agreement between a lot of these big-wig corporate managers. So it's not like I don't like these people. I'm just seeing how our economy is losing out. Okay, so these people had thought probably they were just paying some lip service and they came all together in these nice fancy hotels and had a little chat about there's CO2 in the air, what are we gonna do? And they ultimately agreed that everybody just makes some business plan and this will work out and nobody will ultimately come back to them.
I hate to disappoint conservative Twitter, but I am going to circle back.
And you guess it, this was the actual one case when the left circled back. So these highly intelligent managers, they have agreed to this climate agreement, and therefore, of course, all these politicians thought, if those specialists, if the executives of the companies actually say it's possible and so on, they just have to make plans on their own, so be it. So they made a law that allowed the courts and the businesses to actually devise the politics for them. So it's no longer this Western process where, the public debates and then the parliament makes a law and then the judges just have to see to it that a law actually is broken or it was not broken. No, we are now at this place where, those are the targets. And you do whatever you need to do to achieve those targets. Basically, the mafia approach, disguised as liberalism. Everybody just does whatever he promises to do, even if it's not possible to do. But he will just then be held accountable to some unfeasible targets. And nobody's discussing these targets anymore because that's racist. Probably. The court verdict describes this act as the act provides a framework, that is a mafia kiss, so to say, for the development of policy geared towards a permanent and gradual reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the Netherlands to a level that will be 95% lower in 2050 than in 1990, with the purpose of curbing global warming and climate change. And this is almost verbatim the translation from the original law, Article 2, number 1. Section 2 reads, in order to achieve this 2050 target, our ministers are obliged to reduce greenhouse gases to 49% by 2030 and to achieve a complete CO2 neutral electricity production by 2050. So here we have a parliament that is shifting the responsibility to the ministries and does not explain the specifics of the do's and don'ts. This is totally in opposition to what a parliamentarian system used to be about. It used to be about exact specified do's and don'ts for the population so that everything that's not banned is basically allowed and your freedoms. That was the parliamentarian system until fairly recently. But this is not the first time I see something like this. A lot of the directives coming from the EU are actually this target-focused garbage. And we have no longer these clear do's and don'ts. Actually, this arbitrariness in the legal process, the fogginess and the uncertainty is a hallmark of actual tyrannies, of actual dictatorships. I'm not saying that we are already in such a sphere, but we are heading towards such. And it is very unsettling that parliaments or any other authority, like the court here in this example in The Hague, in the direct example with Shell, they are just dishing out orders, but they cannot be bothered with a feasibility question and with the exact do's and don'ts. No, we see a pseudo-liberalism here in order to diminish the responsibility by the authorities. The responsibility is now all on your shoulder. It is now on the shoulder of Shell, who also continue to move it downwards to what was the Section 3 or Sphere 3, I forgot what that was, to the consumer. And it's always the lower end and the chain that actually has to decide the do's and don'ts. So the blame for not meeting certain targets, it's always with the little guy and never with the authorities. And to be more specific, by shifting the responsibility, the parliament has obliged the minister to create a climate plan. And it says in the law, the climate plan contains the main points of the actions taken by our ministers, the climate policy to be pursued aimed at realizing the objectives referred to in Article 2. So here again, it's the main points, and then you can bet that the minister will also then transfer his responsibility to somebody else. Most of this is driven by activist NGOs like Greenpeace, who have sued Shell in this case in the Netherlands. But there is also a second danger that is not on the minds of a lot of conservatives, and that is that the entire upper class is tainted with this green cult right now. And what we see is that there are activist hedge funds, and I'm not making up this term, that's actually their self-description, activist hedge funds, who seek to undermine how big corporations work, who seek to change the overall behavior towards stakeholder value, towards something else but a rational, profit-oriented economy. And one example is Chevron, of course, as I've mentioned already. They had on Wednesday this shareholder meeting where 61% voted for a cut of Scope 3 emissions. Again, Scope 3 is the consumer burning their fuels. So they are supposed to take measures against you doing with their product what you want to do. Additionally, there were two initiatives that were luckily voted down, but they are telling where the thing is heading, and also they were quite narrow. So one was the full disclosure of every lobbying activity. And it is quite strange how we see a lot of left-wing lobbying and very open. You have all these NGOs. Sometimes they get a lot of money from the taxpayer, particularly here in Europe. That's not actually so much the case in America, but here in Europe, they are not NGOs, they are GOs. And while you see an endless army of left-wing activists, you barely ever actually see somebody talking in favor of big oil or the oil industry or basically any industry. Most of the time you just hear feminists, you hear environmentalists, you hear them all the time, and it's them complaining about the industry. It's them complaining about Fox News. So it's again this obsession that basically they are occupying every niche of our society, and yet they are pointing to this last radio host, this last television channel like Fox News, and this last industry that has not yet totally kowtowed to their interests. And still they make it out to believe that you constantly hear a stream of commentary defending the oil industry, and that the oil industry was kind of manipulating your thoughts through this lobbying thing. There are not many people who talk about it voluntarily so far, even though it is a topic that affects everybody's life. And the reason is because all the issues that the left can push into the public through their occupation of basically all the arts, all the news organizations, etc., they can push their topics into the public sphere, and all the topics that are a bit more remote are considered difficult. So if you talk about, shareholders having a convention and so on, people are just having a little slumber while you talk. And not only are these topics very important, they also should actually make you emotional. They should rile you up because they are affecting your everyday life. Your industry depends on the oil and so on. So the topics that are flushed into the open are usually the talking points of the political left and some counter talking points. But the topics that actually matter, like your prosperity and the future of your economy, your jobs, those topics barely make it into the public. And why is it? Because if your environment is constantly talking about transgender hormones, for example, you become somewhat of an expert on a fringe topic, on an irrelevant topic like transgender blah blah. In the meantime, while somebody tries to address a topic that actually affects your life, it sounds like it's a fringe topic. It sounds like it's boring, it's difficult, and people are just falling asleep while you talk, etc. You hardly ever see any lobbyists talking about big oil because as of now, they would actually have to be specifically trained because it's not common knowledge. We are not becoming experts on such a topic because it's relevant and the left likes to distract us. And the second reason is that these oil companies actually don't have so much money left to spend it on some media activities, some lobbying activities. And the second proposal that was voted down was a report about or an ongoing reporting on the status of the ambition to cut emissions to zero by the year 2050. That goal has already been committed by Chevron, I suppose, and the initiative that was voted down was that there should be continuous reporting on how far have you come already, how much have you contributed into cutting Scope 3 emissions, that is your behavior. Crippling your behavior so that you don't spend too much of their product. The fact that the pure love, no hate left is not well-meaning should be fairly obvious from the wording of their gloating articles about the events. Yet the tactic by these investment funds, these activist hedge funds, as they call themselves, is chummy. It's basically like Oprah Winfrey, Ellen DeGeneres, and Benjamin Netanyahu coming into a room and hugging everybody and telling everybody that they are the friends and so on. And this can be seen on the website of one of the hedge funds that was instrumental in undermining Exxon. That was engine number one. They describe themselves on their website as an investment firm purpose-built to create long-term value by harnessing the power of capitalism. This is what it is about. And the next sentence is, we believe a company's performance is greatly enhanced by investments it makes in workers, communities, and the environment. So this is the stakeholder approach opposed to the shareholder approach. So watering the trees in the midst of a rainfall is serving your shareholder value. Somehow stakeholder value were somehow equivalent to shareholder value. And they continue with we believe that over time the interests of Main Street and Wall Street align, and we can engage as active owners to create value by focusing on its alignment. So this is a peace proposal. After decades of fights and a barrage of assaults from same activists against certain executives, managers, and so on, a peace proposal sounds so nice, and a lot of these people are lulled into it. They think that peace is on the horizon and that these people are maybe well-meaning. They are not. They state explicitly what they are about, which is harness the power of capitalism. And the executives have already gone a long way to appease these people. So the company Exxon has already announced a $3 billion investment in carbon capture projects, and last month floated plans for a $100 billion carbon capture facility. Many may not know it, but there is actually already a technology out to capture carbon. It's called plants, okay? And nature grows plants all on its own. You actually don't need oil companies to water the flowers. Okay, so what were the moves that were pushed by this engine number one at the General Convention of Exxon? It is that they had replaced two directors. There will be new executives on the board. The entire professional background was about climate and environmentalism and sustainability, as they like to call it. They replaced two functioning directors on the executive board of Exxon with environmentalists. So you have somebody, basically a hostile agent, right in the center of the executive board, and two of them. How could actually board members be replaced by an activist hedge fund? The total number of shares held by engine number one is only 0.2%. However, they were engaging in what's called a proxy fight. That is, they had rung up basically all these large investors. They relied on the fact that small investors don't turn up on those conventions very often. They rung up large investors, for example, BlackRock, but also retirement funds from California and New York. Investors that could already be convinced were the hedge fund D.E. Shaw, which held $326 million, as well as the already before mentioned California Public Employees Retirement System and the California State Teachers Retirement System, as well as the New York State Common Retirement Fund. But also BlackRock became a proponent of the director swap. Additionally, they had got on board the proxy advisory companies Glass Lewis and ISS. And what those are about is they have actually made it their profession to advise people, to advise shareholders, and very often do so in custody on behalf of shareholders to vote for policies on the general conventions of public held companies in order to maximize the return on a given share. So usually they are profit oriented. They are supposed to look into the policies, into the specific business plans of a given company, and on behalf of the shareholders, they are supposed to maximize what is promising, what is most profitable in the overall conduct of the business. What happened instead here is that they actually allowed themselves to be drawn into these larger policies, into the larger politics, and are now supporting environmentalism. The video is already very long and I cannot really address every single point in it, but you may ask yourself, okay, why are you opposed to environmentalism? Why not save the planet and so on? And the reason is, of course, that the medicine may not be worse than the disease. And what is very easily dismissed by these people, by these environmentalism fanatics, is that there are actually good arguments against them, but they are more difficult to explain. And this is because the main objection is a bit boring, and that is we don't know. Okay, we don't actually know a lot of things. And this is hampering political debates in a lot of different areas. The dumb person has run to the marketplace and has screamed, I want you to panic, or whatever they scream. I want you to do whatever I tell you to do. And I'm 100% certain. And the opposition just has to say, oh, wait, I have a million question marks. Can we just sort out these question marks first? But the dumb person has already convinced 100 people of their certainty, when in reality we only know for sure that the climate is currently in a heating phase. We know for sure that men are contributing to the CO2 in the air, and so on. But there are a lot of factors that actually go into this one measure, which is the temperature, the average temperature per year, blah, blah. This one measure is actually affected by everything that's going on the planet. So basically, to understand the climate, you have to understand everything that's going on the planet. It is basically a meta-natural science field. And no, we have not yet figured out every single aspect of natural science to the degree that we have certainty about all the clouds, the currents in the ocean, etc., etc. There's a long list of topics that are not resolved, and it's unsexy to say we don't know. We don't know yet, and your proposals, they are very damaging. And before we push down your entire list of proposals, we want to have some answers to those question marks first. That's what we actually have to put out, and it's very, very difficult while the other side is already on the marketplace and screams, we know, we are certain, and you have to do what we tell you. That was it for today, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.